The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the speakers or authors and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by the producers of this broadcast. The material herein is for entertainment purposes only.
Welcome to another episode of Scary Stories with Kalila. We've got a really scary story tonight, and I have a very special guest, Deanna Dupont, who also works for Haunted History Tours. She is a manager and a tour guide, and one of our right hands in the company. So she has been to one of the spookiest places in the United States that I think is one of the spookiest places, and that is up in Adams, Tennessee, to investigate the Bell Witch phenomena. So I am going to introduce Deanna and let her. Deanna, welcome to the show. It's wonderful to have you. Thank you so much for coming. Can you give us a little background of the history of the Bell Witch?
Yes. First of all, the first time that I went up there, I didn't know too much about the background. I went with a friend and wasn't an investigation. It was just to visit the area. And it was after that that I got interested in the history of it. We started watching different things on it, documentaries and whatnot, and including the movie American Haunting. Now, the Bell Witch herself, there's a lot of controversy over whether or not she is actually the one doing the haunting or whether she is actually the one that's physically there now, whether she did wrong to begin with or not. But the Bell family is basically, there was a lot going on with that family. And this has been talked about in movies and in print, different things for many years. There is a lot going on in Adams, Tennessee, beyond just what the Bell Witch has got going on up there. So the second time I went up, it was with full knowledge of everything that was happening and had happened, both what I had read about and then what the media had portrayed in Hollywood, had portrayed in the movie, in books, and even family members that had been interviewed throughout the decades, different things that had been going on, even to inner family fights over everything from how they tell the story to what family members believe actually happened. These are descendants of those family members. Different areas besides the Bell Witch area itself around there, the church, Red River Church, is a stone's throw from that area, the Indian mounds that are there that were used as burial grounds. Everything played into a phenomenon that has really, really rocked that area for many, many years. And people who live right in that area that moved there over the past couple of decades didn't know anything about it, but they knew that strange things in the town happened. So the second time when I went up there with full knowledge of the stories behind it all, that's when the things really happened. The first time you can, if you go somewhere and you don't know what's going on, you don't know a background, you can kind of say, oh, well, I felt something, but it was probably the person that I was with or whatever. When you go up there with full knowledge of what's happened in the past and all of the stories, things start to make a little bit more sense. And then I ended up going a third time because of what happened on the second time. So it's been a long saga. I'd actually like to go back in the future again, specifically because you and I have been talking about this and it's piqued my interest again. There's some other areas that I realized when I went back through my notes that I didn't actually get to go and visit that I'd love to visit in the future. But it was probably, I've been to a lot of places that have had some strange goings on, and I do believe that's probably one of the top that we had things that everybody that was with us saw. And no one could explain, but everyone saw. And I had some true skeptics with me the second and third times that I was up there.
Without a doubt, that is one of the strongest haunted areas that I've ever been to. I was there many, many years ago. I had gone during some sort of an event that they had there, and I was actually a speaker on one of their boards. And when they brought me up there, I didn't do an investigation. There was a group there doing an investigation, and they brought me up, though they wanted me to do a seance. So they said, we want you to do a seance out in the Dell. Now, the only Dell I've ever heard of was at that time was the farmer in the Dell. So I didn't know what a Dell was. But I found out because they put us on like a hayride, like a tractor pull hayride kind of thing. And they took us way out past these fields and way out into this wooded area. And that apparently was the Dell, was this wooded area. And it was a big opening in the wooded area. And they said, this is where we want you to do a seance. We want you to try to bring in Kate, the lady that is believed to be the witch in the Bell Witch phenomena. Now, as far as I understand, Kate owned property. And this originally, a lot of this goings on between her and John Bell was over some property, a property dispute, if I remember this correctly. And I don't know, I think John Bell kind of ripped her off, or she thought he did. And a lot of people believe that she cursed him before she died. Now, some of the information that I was given at the time was saying, well, okay, of course, my question is, well, why was she a witch? Now, of course, back then, anything that couldn't be explained, you're a witch.
Right.
If you, if you put makeup on back then, you were a witch. You were trying to bewitch people. So there was a lot of criteria of why they were calling people a witch. And I said, well, what made her a witch? And they said, well, when she died, all of these cats were on top of her grave. Well, being a crazy cat lady myself, I think maybe Kate, being an older lady, living alone, she probably had a lot of pets. And when she passed away, her pets were there when she, to mourn her loss, knowing how cats are. So to me, this wasn't criteria enough to label her a witch. And I'd heard stories about this type of labeling before, of course, all throughout time. There's another one in Yazoo City, the Yazoo City witch in Mississippi, where they thought she was a witch because of the cats. So it's like, oh, okay, well, all right, so let's see what happens. And I brought them out to the Dell, and we did a big circle, and we did a seance. And, I do want to say, because I'm a medium, I did not try to bring up anybody in particular. I just said, let's do this circle, and we're going to create this energy to bring in whatever comes in. So I basically opened up a portal. And very interestingly enough, it was one of the more frightening experiences for me, because when this was going on, I became very cognizant of something circling outside the circle. And what I picked up was a very large wolf-like creature. And at some point in time, I felt something breathing down the back of my neck. Now, I'm not sharing this with these people because I wanted them to experience what they were going to experience. And we had some people who were freaking out, and they were describing the lady in white. Some of the stuff was very cliche, but there were a few people that were picking up on the fact that something was going around the circle, and it was growling, and it was upset. And one of the things that I came up with was that a lot of the phenomena that was going on, that was getting blamed on this poor woman, Kate, was not necessarily coming from a ghost or certainly not from a witch, but from Native American spirits who were guardians of the property. I later learned that area is all along the Trail of Tears.
Right.
So,
and there were burials right in that area there too, that they know because they have unearthed bones at different times, and you don't mess with that without consequences.
Right, and the Bell Cave as well.
Yes, and we had the wolf phenomenon too. As we were leaving, they brought us in almost like a hayride situation, except it wasn't a hayride. And when we were leaving in quite a hurry because of some things that had happened that we'll talk about. And when we were leaving, we could see off in the distance what looked like a large wolf. Actually, there were three that were it looked like approaching the tractor and thing that we were on. They were way off in the distance in the fog. If a true skeptic wanted to say, oh, well, that was something else, it's a mirage or whatever, they probably could make themselves believe it. But it showed up in pictures. So what it was at the time, we didn't know, but we've heard numerous people now say that they've had this wolf-like character, this large wolf-like character show up. Some people have said it showed up at the mouth of the cave. I went in the Bell Witch Cave. We did have crazy phenomenon happen in there. And I had teenagers with me too. So that never slept again probably after that night. But the wolf didn't appear to us in there, but it did appear to us out in the Dell, just like what you're saying. And I do believe that the first time was 2009, the second time was 2011, and the last time was 2013.
Okay.
And I'd like to go back now, They still have it, of course.
Now, interestingly enough, you mentioned the fog, and that was another thing. When we went out there, it was not foggy. And to be honest, I do remember it being wintertime. I don't remember what month it was, but it was very cold when I was there. So I want to say it was probably January, February when I was there, possibly. So I don't remember exactly, but I do remember it being very, very cold when we went. And I do remember that when we left that situation, closing out the circle, closing the portal, we got back on the hayride thing and we started leaving, and following us was this big rolling fog, just huge, thick, rolling fog. And it was as if it was following us. And there was a guy there that was part of the paranormal team, and he was part Cherokee from the area. And he was very much into Native American spiritualism and, was very intuitive. And I just, rather than say, oh, look, that's that, I just said, what do you see in that fog? And he said, wolves.
Yes.
And I saw them too. So it's very interesting that there's so many people. It's kind of like if I see a wolf, then maybe it's a figment of my imagination. But if I see a wolf, he sees a wolf, and you go there 10 years later and you see a wolf, right. Pretty certain, it's there's something going on with the wolf situation there. And
right, exactly.
I felt it was guardian spirits. I did not feel it was anything human or anything that had been human at any point in time. And I also felt like it was not anything malevolent. We're not talking about a demon. We're not talking about black magic, which a lot of people want to throw that element in there. We're talking about spirits that can be very vicious if they are crossed. And they are there to guard the land and to protect the burial ground. So when people intrude on that, and you've got all of these ghost hunters coming in and they're wanting orbs and all this stuff, they're going to get very defensive, and they're going to protect. They're going to do their job because that's their job. And what was interesting was that one of the messages that I got was that the spirits did not want the people spending the night in that cabin. There was something going on in the Bell cabin that night, and I was invited to stay there. And I think I made a lot of people mad because I said, I can't go. You can't ask me to call up spirit and ask spirit, and spirit tell me, don't you go. And then I go. So I went back to my room, and I found out that everyone got sick in the cabin that night. Everybody simultaneously was hanging over the edge of the porch, vomiting, because people were literally getting sick. So we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to hear more about what your experience was. We'll be right back.
Imagine it's the year 2020. With so many podcasts, streams, and interesting stations, you've finally found your paranormal hotspot. We want to personally invite you to join the discussion by tuning in and listening to The Seance Room. With all new and returning guests, intriguing investigative explorations, and scintillating conversations with the beyond. With your hosts, Victor and Linda Salazar.
Hey, Victor here. Are you ready to evoke strange curiosities? Walk through parallel dimensions and delve together into the controversial science of paraphenomena.
Afraid to question the shadow in your room? Footsteps down the hall when no one's home? Bothered you'll become one of those people? Leaving no stone unturned, no topic unanswered. dim the lights, turn up the volume. This is Linda. You reached the threshold of your para podcast.
Let's not forget Norma, aka Mama C.
Hi, I'm Mama C. Grab your favorite cocktail, find your comfy spot, and join me as we engage in some supernatural interactions that will knock your boots off.
Oh, and I'm Rick. I just sit behind all the pretty blinking lights. Be ready.
Welcome to the seance. Haunted airwaves, conversations with the beyond, chilling messages from spirits and odd entities. The spirits are going live.
Okay, so we're back. So, Deanna, I mean, we've established that you've had a lot of the same situations that other people have had. So let's specifically talk about what it was that you found there, because I saw some of your photographs and they were pretty frightening.
It is frightening. It was frightening and exhilarating all at the same time, because of course you don't expect to have anything like that happen. And it required me to go back and really do some studying on what these things were. I didn't know about the Indian land before I went the second time. I knew the story of the Bell family and the Bell Witch, but I didn't know about the Indian land until after these things started showing up in pictures. I took myself and a friend, and we had 5 teenagers with us. And the second time we went into the cave. The entire time that we were going into the cave, there was a heaviness that kind of was around us. I was chalking that up at the time to one of the students that I had with me, who was very, very negative all the time in her regular life. And I just kept telling her, lighten up, because you're bringing this heaviness in. It turned out it wasn't her. It was something else entirely. But we get into the cave, and at one point in time, they'll turn off the lights that they have wired in down there. And, they try to make it a little scary experience or whatever. But during the time that the lights are on, you can take as many pictures as you want. And so at one point in time, we kept hearing a howling. You can chalk that up to it's a cave. It may be an echo. It may be a plant. It may be something else, coming up from the other places. But it didn't sound like that. It sounded like exactly what we were talking about before, which was wolves. But yet we hadn't had this experience yet with the fog or anything like that. So at one point in time, we line up. We're going to get a picture with myself and my friend and the students that we have with us. And all of us line up. We've got our arms around each other for the picture. And this is back when you still had to develop film. For those listeners that are too young to know, that's when we didn't have cell phones that showed it immediately. And, but anyway, when we got the pictures back, the one girl, the negative girl that I was talking about, is not in the picture. You can see my arm around her. You can see the other girl's arm around a figure that's not there. And she's way in the background walking the other direction, but yet she was right there in the picture with us. We never could explain that. It was almost like she had had an out-of-body experience or something. And then in the pictures as well, there's this face that is very, very clear, that looks like, well, it truly looked like the devil. It looked demonic. What it was, we still don't know. That's one of the pictures that I sent you. We still don't know what that was, but we kind of got to looking at it later after knowing about the Indian part of it. And we realized that could be a multitude of spirits, of anything from an Indian chief to someone there, we don't know. But right above where we were standing is where they had done an excavation, and years before, like 30 years before, and had found bones. And that's an Indian burial ground. And so, why they've got people going through this cave and on this land when it's an Indian burial ground, it's sacred land. It shouldn't be messed with. That was part of it. The negative girl that I had with me just kept saying, I've got to go. And then we see this picture when we come back, and she's going in the picture. She's not with us. It's like she had left. So we weren't sure about the phenomenon with that, but we were absolutely positive she was supposed to be with us in the picture. Numerous out of focus pictures and things that we cannot say were legit. They could have easily been just a shake of the camera. But there were too many things in those pictures that were clear that didn't make any sense. When we were leaving the cave, they did the same thing with us. They wanted us to go back into the cabin. The cabin is a rebuilt cabin. It's not the original place that they lived, but they wanted to show us like, well, this would be like what his bedroom was like. And, these are his things next to the bed or whatnot. And I did not feel comfortable in that cabin. And that's when I asked, was this actually part of the Bell family's property? And he said, well, no, the cabin's not, but the land was. And I thought, well, maybe it's just me then. Maybe I just don't feel comfortable. Maybe I thought it was theirs or something. But then you said that about them getting sick in the cabin. And I remember all of us felt very uncomfortable about the cabin itself. When we were leaving, the one thing that they had said was don't take anything from the cave, don't take a rock from the cave or anything like that. And of course, as you know, you don't take anything off sacred land. When we got in the car, the girl that was driving the car, that it was her car, she had her key with her. We had never gone back to the car. No one had left each other at all. But when we got in the car and went to leave, the floorboard of her driver's seat, like where her feet would go, was covered with rocks. And they were not there when we left. And so I made her get out of the car and take the rocks back up there. I knew she didn't take them. I watched her the whole time. I knew she didn't, but wherever they came from, we weren't going home with them in that vehicle. So she took them back to the edge of the cave and told the person, I don't know, these were in my car, but her car had been locked. She swears it was locked. I was blaming them, like, you guys got into the car, you're playing a trick on us and all this stuff. But there was just too much that happened that night. And we stopped for coffee a few blocks down after we left the property. And as we're parallel parking, the girl says, what is that behind us? And she's looking in the side mirror, driver's side mirror, and she's seeing what's behind us, which is the town, the downtown Adams, Tennessee. And it looks like something's on fire behind us. And the girl on the other side is seeing it out that side mirror too. The driver is seeing it out the mirror. But when we would turn around and look, there was no fire. It was only through the mirrors, but we all saw it. And so I found out later exactly where we were parked, if we'd have been walking behind us, is where a huge fire had happened back when the Bells lived on that property. They still to this day don't know what caused the fire. Could have been anything back in that day with candles and things like that. Right. But it destroyed the entire property. The house that sits there now is a beautiful white house. There was no fire that night, but yet we all sat in that vehicle and saw that fire in the rearview mirrors of all of that car. So what that has to do with it, like I said, some of the things that's happening in that town have nothing to do with perhaps the Bell family or the Bell Witch or anything about that story, just the creepiness of the entire city. They told us to go to I believe it's called Red River Church. I think that's what it is. It's the old church. It's been rebuilt a couple times, but it's still a very old church. They do still have services there, and it's right on the river. Like it literally, you can walk in the front door and see the little creek right next to it. And they said the door would be unlocked. And sure enough, the door was unlocked. We opened the door, no breeze or anything like that, walked into the church. The door slams behind us. We could not get it back open. We had to go out a side door and come back around and open that door without any problem. It was like it was locking us in the church. There were just really strange things that were happening. But right there on that property that night, as we were leaving, they had to take us from the cabin after we came out of the cave to our vehicle. And in that time frame is where we saw that fog rolling in. We had to get to a cattle gate and go out the property that way. And that fog was rolling, just like you said, with what I think was 3 visions of these wolves. Someone mentioned to me years later that it could, wolves are synonymous with Indians, and that it might have been a protector of the property, that they don't want those people there. We were there this time that I'm talking about. We were there in November. It was right after they had a huge Halloween event. And so they had hundreds, probably, if not thousands of people coming through there. And they had, seances and card readers and things throughout the month to make money for the land. But being that it is sacred land, There's a lot of reasons to not have that stuff happening on that land.
Right.
And then I went back the next time and actually interviewed a family member and went to where John Bell's grave is, that they actually had to move because of people trying to dig it up and destroy it and all that stuff. And that's out in the middle of the Dell too. I was able to walk all the way out there to this family area, and it is not a comfortable place to be. The movie portrayed John as not so nice of a man. I don't know if that's true or not. I didn't know him personally. I know that you can take a lot of creative license with stories, and so I really don't know what was true and what was not. The family swears that all of that is just made up by Hollywood, but there was something just dark and sinister around the area where he is buried. Not the area where he was buried, but the area where he is buried. So, there's a lot going on right there. And so many things happened in that cave. Of course, caves can do things with your eyes, and you can see things that aren't there. But when they show up in the pictures and they're as clear as what I sent you, or when you have a physical body that's with you and 4 other people or 5 other people in a picture, and all of a sudden that person is not in the picture, but she's way behind going the other direction, something's not right there. It's just a lot of phenomenon. And I did go back. Like I said, the next 2 years later, I went back, did the interview with a family member, got to go out to the grave site, did a lot more digging, but I'd love to go back now, all these years later, and see what has changed and what hasn't changed, and if it's worse or if it's better. I just feel like there's a lot to uncover there, almost like a message being sent out that maybe somebody hasn't gotten to yet.
Interesting. Yeah, I think so. I really do think so. And I'm sure I'm not the first person that psychic medium has gone there and given those messages from spirit saying, get these people out of here. They're being disrespectful. They're inquisitive and all, but it's not a sideshow. And right. I think that is the message. And I got the very same impression too, that John Bell was not a very nice person. And this was many years before any movie was made about him. I kind of got the impression, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems to me that I heard something to the effect of that he had desecrated the graves in that cave and was using the cave to store food. Almost
yes, like that's what I heard too.
His refrigerator. And I mean, that right there, it's very reminiscent, it's very similar to a lesser degree, to a haunting with a lesser degree of it, is the Myrtles, where General Bradford dug up sacred burial grounds and burned the bodies. And that kind of desecration brings up these guardian spirits, and it really kind of creates this generational curse.
Yes.
On the land, and it takes a long time for it to go away. And I don't think it has anything to do so much with that woman that they labeled a witch as it does to do with what was done to the property and what's going on with these spirits. But we're going to take a little break real quick, and we're going to come right back.
Submitted for your approval. New Orleans. Seductive, magical, mysterious, and haunted. There is no place on this earth with as much ghost and vampire activity as New Orleans. Imagine, if you will, a tour that takes you to sites in the French Quarter of actual documented hauntings. The Haunted History Tour is just that tour. Every day, every night, all year round. This tour has been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN, and it's available to you. Are there ghosts and vampires in the French Quarter? Find out by taking the tour that everyone is talking about, the Haunted History Tour. For more information, call Haunted History Tours at 861-2727. That's 861-2727. This is not a Halloween spook house. This is real.
All right, so we are back. So, Deanna, you left that experience. You had all of these things happen, and then you went back. You went back another time, right?
I went back in 2013. The reason I went back was they called me. They actually called me just a few months after we had been there the last time, and they called me. There was a question about the rocks getting in the car. Apparently it had happened numerous times after we left with other people, and people were complaining about it. Some people had done reviews, and they said that staff members were putting rocks from the cave in their car and trying to scare them and all this stuff, and they were swearing that it wasn't that way. So they were calling people that had had it happen and asking if they ever found out anything or did they know what had happened. When they called about that, and I told them no, but I didn't appreciate it if anybody had done anything like that and all this stuff, but I wasn't falling for that, blah, blah, blah. And so finally they called a second time and they asked if I could come back up. I had sent them some copies of the pictures that we had. And I had basically gone down in bullet points and told them our experience. And when they saw the pictures and then they heard the story about the fire, which had nothing to do with their property, like I said, they called me and they said, would you be interested in coming back up? You can even spend the night on the property if you want to. I said, no, I'll pay for a room. I wasn't about to stay on the property, but I did say that I would come back up. When I went back up, they had a descendant of the Bell family there for me to talk to. He was interested in talking to me about the experience, and they had had several of the same kind of experiences. They try to do as much with the property as they can. They try to be involved as much, but they were interested in preserving John Bell's memory because the movie American Haunting had done what they considered to be a lot of damage to his so-called reputation. And a lot of the descendants now were upset about that, and they still wanted to try to clear his reputation. I told them I was not the person that they needed to talk to about that. I didn't know the man, and I wasn't talking to him in the afterlife. So, I wasn't able to help him with that. But apparently where that fire scene had taken place, which had nothing to do with the Bell family, but it had everything to do with that witch's quote unquote family. Apparently that is her descendants that live on that property. And so they tend to believe that this curse that she did not put on the Bell family, but may actually be on her family because different things have happened, not so much to the Bells in later years, but to her family. And they believe that there was possibly a curse on her as well. So, maybe that was something that had transferred over beyond, what we even know, but that's the property that her family owns. So I talked to them about that fire. They then took me out further into the dell to where John is buried, and the daughter is buried out there. It's on private property. It's in the middle of almost like a grotto area that they've created just to kind of keep it private from public view. They had put him in a regular grave, and people were so angry after seeing the movie and thinking that he was maybe one way that he might not have been. They were desecrating the grave. So they dug him up and they put him in this other grave. And it's a dark place, not because of trees, but because it just feels dark. His daughter is buried there as well. Other family members are buried in other places, but this was a family grave. Again, this is still Indian land. This is still part of that sacred land. Now you've got this man buried out there with family members buried out there on a land that should not be their land. And the cattle kept dying. Whenever they would put their cattle out there, the cattle would die. And they called it, I cannot remember now, it wasn't like mad cow disease, but it was some weird name that they said kept happening to the cows. They ended up having to move them across the street to another lot or another field, because every time they would be grazing in that field, they would die. And so the family members are telling me this. I then ended up in like 2016 or something like that, meeting one of the quote unquote witches' descendants. And she said that there's been literal hell to pay throughout the years for their family. And she does believe that there was some kind of a curse placed on them, not on the Bells, but on them. Back in that day, and I've tried to reason this in my head. We know that back in that day, it was all about how much land you could acquire and how much money you could acquire. And no one really stopped to think about the consequences for, the Indians or running the Indians off originally or anything, or what you did with that land. It was the same way with the witch. He wanted that land. She cursed him verbally, which did not mean a curse. If I was back in that day and dealing with essential oils, I'd be a witch, like you said,
Right,
So, yeah. And so I do believe that there was some innocence involved in just a kind of a not coming together of ideas of whose land is whose land, and she would not sell a piece of her land to him, and he had been used to acquiring anything he wanted. There are several stories from family members that mental illness ran through the family. It could have been that kind of thing going on as well. But I specifically asked the descendant of John Bell that I was talking to, I asked him point blank, have you seen the wolves on the land that we saw? Have you had experiences with the paranormal? Do you even believe in the paranormal? He said, I've had experiences with every bit of it, but the worst was the fact that every time I get in my car, when I leave this property, there are rocks that I believe came from the cave.
Whoa.
So,
wow.
And being that was happening to other people, we know we're not supposed to take anything from sacred land. You're certainly not supposed to go into a graveyard. You don't take something from the grave or whatever the case may be, especially bones and things like that. But we have been messing with these people's, this sacred land of these Indians for years. And whether or not this is a message that they're just trying to get, or they are trying to, do something bigger, I don't know. But I do believe that these families are intertwined in some kind of a curse that has gone on now for at least a century, if not a little more. And the fact that the woman's property was the family member's property was the one that was burning. It was the one that had burned prior to her having the property. And then now, in looking through the mirror, of course, into the past, we see it. There's just an awful lot going on. I did find out also on the trip in 2013 that the church had some not so nice things happen at it and had been closed down. One of the reasons that it burned one of the times was a church member actually had set fire to the church because some not so nice things had happened inside the church to another family member. So again, there's all these things, this little bit of evil here and there that goes on with this. And it just is a very creepy thing. I got nowhere as far as like concrete ending to a story. Yes, I met with his descendant. Yes, I met with her descendant. We talked, but there was no, period at the end of the sentence when we left. There was no concrete, oh, well, this explains this. It was just a lot of questions that I honestly don't think they will ever be able to fully answer. I think that went into the grave, and until they stop with that land, until they stop using sacred land as a novelty, I don't think they can be rid of that curse.
That's the answer. And I say that as someone who has conducted a seance there, someone who has gotten messages from the spirits. That's it. That is the key. Stop making it an amusement park. Right. And that is what the spirits want. And that is what the spirits requested at the time. And I think I disappointed a lot of people because they wanted to do what they wanted to do. And then they wanted, don't you want to stay in the cabin with us? And I was like, I can't
right.
get that kind of a message from spirits, especially native spirits, and then go and partake in this. It's like I was told specifically, step back. And being a servant of spirit, I have to do what spirit has told me to do. And spirit was very specific, saying, deliver the message, tell them this, that we want everybody to leave and we want you to step back. And I stepped back and, of course, people were like, well, wait, we paid you to come here and do this. And I said, you paid me to come and do a seance and tell you what spirit said. And I did that.
Right.
That's right. It wasn't what you wanted to hear, but I did what you paid me to do. And now I have to do what spirit has instructed me to do. And I will always stand by that. Right. But we're going to take a little break again and come back because I want to revisit that picture where somebody was walking away because that's happened before, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be right back. Follow me, Kalila Smith, into the mysterious world of spirits. Searching for Spirits, the ultimate guide for ghost hunters, is a concise how-to manual for anyone who enjoys a good ghost hunt. Learn the history of spiritualism, learn what a ghost is and what is not. Learn the truth about poltergeist. We'll also delve into the realm of spiritual beings that never were human, the world of demons, real vampires, and we'll look at some real case studies. This is a must-have for everyone interested in ghost hunting, from the novice to the expert. Completely updated in its second edition, this is one of the first guides for ghost hunting based on actual first-hand experiences. Available on Amazon.com. Searching for Spirits, the ultimate guide for ghost hunters, by Kalila Smith. Okay, so we're back. Let's talk a little bit about that picture where the girl was turning her back and walking away, because we've seen that in another situation, in a place that I truly believe is an actual portal to the other side, and that is the cemetery where the old Charity Hospital Cemetery, where the Katrina Memorial is. And you're familiar with the picture.
Yes.
It was our people who worked at the visitor center. They took the bus tour with did they take it with you? Were they in your group?
They were in a different group.
Okay, but they took the bus tour, and the dead of night. And this is when we were going in a lot of the cemeteries. And they were just kind of hanging out and having a good time standing outside. They were kind of like in between the Katrina Cemetery and St. Patrick's Cemetery next door to it, and they had somebody take a picture of all of them, and you got one picture with all of them there, and then all of a sudden one of the guys has his back turned, and then you see him walking down the street. And
right.
I said, "Where is he going?" And they said, "That didn't happen." And I said, "What do you mean it didn't happen?" I'm looking at the picture, and they said, "That's the point. It showed up in the picture as if he was walking away, but it never happened." And I find that very interesting because, here again, you've got that validation of it doesn't just happen there. This is happening in very haunted places, and specifically burial places.
There was a phenomenon back away. Yes, and there was a phenomenon back a ways that people were talking about after the picture at the Bell Witch Cave that we had. I kept questioning different people, and had they ever seen anything like that again? Because it bothered me. You can reason away certain things. An extra face in a picture, it's a spirit or whatever the case may be, but this was actually a human being that's with you, that's suddenly not with you, that was when the picture was taken. And they talked about this one guy that I talked about that was a photographer. He said, now with the capabilities of cameras and how fast the shutter speed is and everything like that, just the thought process of a person could be enough to change where they are in the picture if their thoughts are somewhere else. Now that's just his idea. Obviously, it's not a proven theory, but it does kind of make sense with the picture at the Bell Witch Cave. Like I said earlier, the girl that is not in the picture with us, that's got her back, and she's probably a good 30 yards away, walking backwards. She wanted out. She did not want to be there at that particular time. She was terrified. She swore she saw faces in the cave, which turned out in the pictures. And so she was not happy there at all. And yet in the picture, one she's in, and the next one she's 30 yards behind us, facing the other direction. And if his theory was right about a person's thoughts being elsewhere, I wonder if maybe that's what that is. If maybe the guy at the Katrina Memorial was thinking about the other cemetery down the street, or or seeing something else. I don't know. I don't know what the phenomenon would be, but I have seen it since. We had a customer on that same bus tour that was talking about they had a picture at another place wherever they were from, where a person was missing in the picture. And as they went through their camera, they were finding the person off in the distance in other pictures, but yet they said that and it was a child, and that child had never left their side. Now, that child wasn't on this particular tour, but yet they had the story. So like you said, it is happening at other places that are haunted, specifically sacred ground. And even though the Katrina Memorial is not an Indian burial ground, it is most certainly sacred ground. especially because it has so many people buried there with no names and everything else. It's definitely sacred ground. So, or hallowed ground, I guess. But yeah, it's very strange. And to this day, the girl that was not in the picture, walking away in the picture, she has very, very odd things happen wherever she goes. She won't come to New Orleans anymore because strange things have happened to her. She swears New Orleans doesn't like her. But it's almost like the spirits are constantly trying to give her a message that she is not open to hear. Maybe she has a gift that she hasn't ever tapped into, but she is not open to hear it. Or a curse, right. So it's odd that it's that person that wasn't in the picture, because she, like I said, she's really terrified of those things and has it happen a lot to her where strange things happen and cannot be explained. And she'll, I was with her where her phone charger flew out of the wall and across the wall, and she went over, thought it was like some kind of a power surge, plugged up her phone in another outlet, and the outlet again spit that phone charger out. It wasn't happening to anybody but her. It was almost like they didn't want her to have the energy. So strange things have happened like that. At the Katrina Memorial, I've seen it more often than I can count, with different things happening to people like that. The picture that you speak of from the Katrina Memorial is a phenomenon that I would love to know how it happens and what the reasoning is for it to happen like that, because that person is a human being. It's not a spirit that's showing up in the picture. It's an actual one of our customers that was walking away when they were supposed to be there. And I'd love to know what causes that to happen.
Now thoughts are energy. Everything is energy. Everything we do is energy. And thought forms have an energy of their own. I mean, and we know that people can create entities with their thoughts. If you focus on something enough, people have actually, I'm not talking intelligent, beings get created, but you can create, non-intelligent entity-like things that can be very chaotic. These people who want to conjure up demons and conjure up this, and they want to do this. If you focus on that a lot, and that is where you're putting that energy into that thought form, it can take on a life of its own.
Right.
And that is a metaphysical fact and quantum physics fact. But I don't understand it totally how it's happening, but I do know that in that particular place, in that particular cemetery, there have been instances. I was on a tour one night, and two of the women that were on my tour were not there when we were getting on the bus, and I started calling out to them, and they came running from all the way in the back of the property. And they said, "We thought you were back there." And I said, "Well, why in the world would you think I was back there?" And they said, "Because there was a lady who looked just like you with the flowing skirt. And we followed her back there. And then we heard your voice over this way." And literally they saw someone with the naked eye, a full-bodied apparition. And they followed her back there. And obviously it wasn't me, because I was at the bus.
Well, we know there are spirits in that cemetery. We also know that there are spirits. I know personally that there are spirits in that cemetery that want to get important messages across. And, so like I said, I'd love to know more about the phenomenon of the person not being in the picture. Is someone drawing the attention of that person away? Is that what that means? What is the story behind that? And there's so many different people that have seen the same figures over and over again at the Katrina Memorial. The same, the woman in the flowing skirt that looks like you, that has been told probably, I don't know, in the days that I did the tour, it probably at 20 times, that same description of a person. Of course, one man in particular, a spirit that changed my life forever, was there, and that's been told over and over and over again. And so, when you start to have the same spirit figure show up from people all over the country, not just local people that may have heard a story, but from all over the country, and people who never would have had any knowledge of what a person looked like that somebody else had seen months or years before. That's when it really starts to hit home with, this is much bigger than any of us. This is a tale of its own. And like the guy that was missing in the picture that was walking away, a lot of people have said, of course we know who he is, and a lot of people have said that he's really in tune with hearing spirits. And if that's the case, then was he hearing a spirit at that moment that kind of, pulled him away with a thought process or something like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, we should really definitely, and I tell you what I would like to do, because, I definitely want to do another show with you with your other experience that you had in that cemetery, because you had a very personal experience there. And I actually do another show called Afterlife Podcast with Billy Roberts, who is a psychic medium in the UK, whom I work with for many, many years. He and I started working together back in 2003. And I'd like to get his opinion on that. So maybe we can get Billy on the show and get you back and talk a little bit about, and even show, because we even did a reenactment of your experience there. And, we can listen to you tell the story and see the reenactment of what really happened as you tell it, and then maybe get his opinion. I'd like to have his opinion on that. So maybe this is a story we can say to be continued.
Absolutely. I think all stories are to be continued.
They are indeed. So we're kind of winding it down right now. Want to thank everybody for coming out. Definitely, if you're not already part of the group, I've got a group on Facebook that's called Scary Stories with Kalila. We want your stories. If you have an experience that you want to share and be on the show, or have us addressed on the show, if you have a question, please send that in to us. We have an email for it called scarieststories@yahoo.com. And we will definitely look at it. And if it's scary enough, we'll even have you on the show. And, this is more than just telling scary stories. It's also kind of like, from a psychological point of looking at some of the mechanics behind this. And in this particular case, digging in deeper into some sort of an explanation as to what's happening. And Billy's got a lot of experience. He was he's the originator of this television psychic. He had a television show back in Liverpool 40 years ago. So he's been doing it a very long time, and he has been a part of psychic investigations all throughout the UK and here in the United States for quite a number of years. So I'd like to bring him on the show and let him look at some of these things, and let's get his opinion about it, because I think that would be very interesting. So we are going to wind it up. And again, this is Deanna Dupont, and she's with Haunted History Tours. So, when you're in town in New Orleans and you want to take a tour, if you want to tour with Deanna, make sure you ask for her. Absolutely. So thank everybody for coming out. And thank you, Deanna. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.